And together we explore societal matters and the stand of the law in Nigeria. My name is Miriam Usman. I will be introducing our guest as well as our topic of conversation after this break. Please stay with us. Welcome back. Today on the program, You and the Law explores one of the most controversial topics in Africa and in Nigeria. Now, this, of course, is the same-sex marriage in the country. This is not a new topic in Nigeria, and up to 2014, when the then president of Nigeria, President Abeokuta Jonathan, signed the bill of the Same-Sex Marriage Prohibition Act. Now, this particular bill was supported and applauded by most Nigerians and even some religious houses in the country. This also kind of brought reactions from international communities and organizations, which sees Nigerians stand on this topic as something that tramples on the human rights of Nigerians. Now, fast forward to 10 years later, it feels like this particular law is no more in practice, as the increase of homosexuality is coming by the day, and the only question is, what happened to the law on this particular topic? Now, to take us further on this conversation, I am being joined by Yakubu Hassan, a legal practitioner. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yes, it's good to have you here.
Thank you.
So I'm going to have us start the conversation today by telling us what's your view or what's your take on that particular bill before it was passed into.
All right, I feel that the legislation was a welcome idea by a majority of Nigerians, as at the time it was passed in 2013.
Yes.
You know, there was some kind of influence from the Western world as to the position Nigeria was going to take. And we all knew then, during the Barack Obama-led administration, it was so tough. And the position of the West was that Nigeria should not pass such a legislation because they felt it will affect the human rights of individuals and all of that. But of course, Nigeria, through its democratic organizations and structures, passed the law, and they believed that that law was what the people needed. And it was well applauded around the country. Religious organizations, individuals, civil society organizations, so on and so forth, applauded it. The law passed through the first reading, second reading, and it became legislation. So for that to pass through the democratic process within our constitution, it was an acceptable process. The both houses of parliament passed it. So I believe it's something that most Nigerians applauded at the time.
Now let's bring it down to from 2014 down to 2024. That's like 10 years interval.
Yeah.
Do you see the society as the same? People who applauded this particular act and of now, because on the increase right now, it feels like this particular act is still there, even at the young age. I saw a very recent video of secondary school students protesting against LGBTQ, and I can only wonder, I thought we have a law that prohibits this act.
Well, for me, I believe that the law is still there and it's still very much effective, though to the extent to which the law has been tested, that we can't say. Because for a law to be tested, there has to be police investigation on the subject matter of who has violated the provisions of the law. Then there has to be prosecution, and then afterwards conviction. But to feel that because there is a growing LGBTQ community, then that means that the law is not in existence is not true. It is one thing for there to be a law, and it's another thing for that law to be effectively enforced. Okay. And the provisions of that legislation, it has about 7 sections. They not categorically state officers or maybe a unit that will be in charge of investigating and prosecuting. Though we know that traditionally the police is supposed to be in charge of investigating and prosecuting, but there is no agency provided within the structure of that particular legislation to carry out, to fish out persons who violate that particular legislation. So, but by and large, the law is still standing, the law is still valid, the law is still very much effective. And if, for instance, a person sees, individuals who probably violate that particular legislation, they can, report. Police can begin investigation, and then that investigation can be tested. I think I recall sometimes 3 years ago, if I'm not too sure, but the law was tested at some point in a court, and the last I can remember is that it was dismissed. So I believe strongly that there is a place for enforcement, there's a place for that law to be tested in the court. So at this time that we are in, the law is still very much valid, it's still very much effective, and it is only for the community to be, the society to be much more aware that this law is still very much effective. And if anybody reports you or any investigation is being carried out, you'll be arrested. Just recently in Delta, a group of, I think a club, a gay club or homosexual club, where
yes, I saw that
they were arrested. So I mean, the law is still very much effective, very, very much effective.
Well, you just mentioned the particular gay club.
Yeah.
I saw one a few days ago, and it was a marriage ceremony between two ladies. Same-sex marriage. It was all over on the internet. And I can only ask, does the law not see things like this? Well,
will I say the law is blind? The law is only words written down in the pages of books. It takes actors, it takes government agencies, it takes the police, it takes the society to implement and bring that law to pass. So law in itself will not change a system. It is those behind the law, those who enforce the law, those who interpret the law, those who are law officers, individuals who work around the circumference of the law, that bring the law into activation, into effect. So law in itself, if we decide to pass a law, and then it is kept in the law books, and then we all keep it in our chambers and in our library, it can't work. It has to be brought into life. And how do you bring a law into life? You breathe into it by interpretation, by prosecution, by investigation, and so on and so forth.
Let's talk about the prosecution for this particular act. I know that there's this 14 years imprisonment attached to it. Is it still the same? It's still the same.
That law has not changed. That law still remains. The provisions of Section 1 up to Section 7 outlines the penalties for persons who engage in such acts. It gives 14 years for those who witness the marriage, those who organize the marriage. Say a priest who organizes the marriage, churches who they will be penalized for about, I think, 10 years imprisonment. Yeah, 10 years imprisonment. So the law is still very much valid. So the law has not been repealed. So nobody should think, oh, because there's a growing outcry for gay rights, then that means the law is dead. Most times, or it's very difficult for you to say that persons, who have violated a particular legislation will be arrested, because it is something that is done between two persons in secret. If not for the fact that intelligence report had gone out, most people wouldn't know that such a marriage was being organized, and so on and so forth. So basically, the law is still very much on ground, it's still very much active, and once tested, it will be activated.
The major fears of some Nigerians who are concerned about this act is we are growing a society. There are young people who are on the internet who see this on the increase. And in those days, we grew up in a place where your sexuality did not really matter. Nobody wanted to talk about it. But now you see young children, young people talking about these things, and it's drawing concerns for people. I want you to be a man and then get married to a woman, not you. It's always, so it's becoming an issue, and stakeholders, parents are out there bringing this to the front burner, to talk about it. So I want us to talk about preaching about this in our society today. Do you think we are doing enough to?
Well, society is dynamic. Culture itself is dynamic. And as we evolve, perspectives begin to change. Maybe sometimes, much more later, some persons may come up to say, well, I think there's a need for us to look at that particular legislation, to review that legislation, to amend that legislation. But as it stands now, we can only keep engaging, having a conversation about what that law is all about, what it seeks to achieve, what amendment needs to be made. Okay, we can't stop engaging ourselves. That's why we're a society. So there should be more forums where people sit together to talk about, oh, is this law still functional? Is this so it's about society. People keep engaging, and to be very honest, as far as Nigeria is concerned, this is no issue. We had concluded it so many years ago that this is the position we are taking as a nation. And this legislation passed through the circumference of democratic ideals. So it is still a debate. Well, people can engage in the debate.
I do agree with you when you say we have concluded. But you see, this thing, it's coming up. And it feels like we are copying this thing from the Western world.
Okay.
We have our cultures, we have our traditions, we have what we use as basis for morality. But it's not the same now. Things are changing because of how much we are exposed to the Western practice. And unless we talk about these things, they will gradually suppress our traditions, our cultures and beliefs.
So I think when we talk about you know, homosexual community growing, perspective changing, I think we should talk more with statistics. What are the statistics? You know, the last I checked, I can't remember the statistics where I read that, but I think in the internet, the gay community in Nigeria, I think on Wikipedia, is about 10 million. Now,
you'll be surprised.
Yes.
In fact, sorry to cut you short, there was a particular website or thereabout that, you know, it is for queers, it's for the gay society, and they told us that with their statistics and all they came out with, Nigeria tops the population of users of that particular site, and it's solely for people who are into homosexuality. So homosexualism. So I'm saying this. There are statistics that are also backing this up.
Yeah. So talking about statistics, when you compare the statistics of Nigeria and maybe a place like the United States, you'll see find out that a large majority of Nigerians still stand with that particular legislation. Okay. Yeah. Yes, there might be a growing population that probably will affect the particular legislation being changed. But as it stands now, when you look at the statistics, you look at the number of people growing, you cannot compare it with the number of people that are still in support of that legislation. Nigeria is a deeply religious nation. The morality and the culture of the people still believe that anti-gay practices or gay practices should be outlawed. And that is still the position we are maintaining. And that has not changed. And you know, that does not mean that people cannot engage to say, oh, is there a need for the law to be looked into, and so on and so forth. But as far as it stands now, the larger population in Nigeria still maintains that particular legislation stands.
All right.
No matter the brouhaha going on the internet.
I like the fact that you're still taking the stand on that, but we'll go on the first break, after which You and the Law continues. Please stay with us. Thank you for staying tuned. You're still watching You and Below right here on OGTV. Today we're taking a close look at same-sex marriage and the Nigerian law. And we have a legal practitioner with us today. He's taking us through the topic. Goes by the name Hassan Yakub. Thank you for staying with us.
Thank you very much.
So you did create a basis for the conversation today that majority part of Nigerians stand with the 2014 bill that was passed by the then President Goodluck Jonathan on the same-sex marriage in Nigeria. Although I still want to believe, I still believe that it's on the increase. Now let's try and weigh this topic with other African countries. Now I know South Africa is or was the first country to legalize same-sex marriage in their country, and somehow I think they've been able to show that in their mostly movies. You know, they try to incorporate that into their movies. That I've not seen in Nigeria. I've not seen where, you know, they are coming out straightforward. Now, before we get to that extent in our country, I think we need to talk about it.
Well, you know, I mean, there's a limit to what a Nigerian movie producer can do. There's a limit to what Nigerian content creators can do as to bringing out gay or same-sex marriages, because like I rightly said, this has clearly been outlawed in very strong terms. In fact, Uganda just in 2023 passed its own legislation, and its own legislation is by death and life imprisonment, according to the provisions of the law. So what is most important is, for us as a country, we are guided by our own legislation. So nobody wants to put himself in a situation where you want to be investigated, you want to be prosecuted, and so on and so forth. Yes, there are gay rights activists, there are persons who might not necessarily be
are
gay.
Openly with their opinions.
Yes, who are openly with their opinion. Everybody has the right to give an opinion. The majority will have their way, the minorities will have their say. So it's a democracy. You would always have times when you have engagements, where you begin to engage and review things. But what is most important is that when you take any step that violates that particular provision, you will be prosecuted in accordance with that particular provision. So what is important, no matter what happens in other climes, social media is just like a wild ground where everything goes, and since everything goes, you get indoctrinations, you get to learn new things, you get to see a lot of things. That does not mean that it has changed our system. Maybe in years to come, maybe that might change, but as it stands now, any content creator, movie creator, Nigerian, has to be careful and has to be dictated. If I am a lawyer trying to talk to a client who wants to produce a movie, except the movie he's producing is trying to correct that particular notion within the Nigerian space, or trying to provoke and that's particular subject matter, I would advise appropriately that, look, the Nigerian legislation does not support this particular thing. Maybe this script should be looked into properly. So that would be my advice to such a scriptwriter or producer.
Well, that's very interesting, because still talking about content on social media, we have a lot of them in Nigeria. I'm not going to lie to you. They are out there. I don't know if they're aware of the law, or sometimes they do these things for content, just to get engagement, because doing the very controversial thing out there is what thrives. And I really want us to talk about this, since the law frowns against it, just for people to be aware that whatever acts that you are indulging is wrong. And we're coming gradually to the end of this topic today, so I want you to just wrap up on this issue of same-sex marriage in Nigeria, and those who are doing it or are engaged in it, whether secretly or openly, what the law says about them. So
from a general perspective, the proponents of homosexualism, gay rights will tell you sexual orientation should be fluid. I should decide whether I'm going to be a female, or I'm going to get married to a man, or as a man, and I'm going to get married to a woman as a woman. So the major proponents believe that, no, for me, this is what I want to do. But the challenge I have with that particular proposition is that some of them have become so toxic, and they do not respect the views of other persons who are heterogeneous, who believe in heterosexual orientation. For instance, I want to get married to a woman, and I do not believe in what you believe. I have the right not to believe in what you believe, all right? So if I have the right to believe in what you do, what you believe, well, not to believe in what you believe, then I should not be chastised. I should not be, it now begs the question, if truly we are a nation, or we are a world of freedom of expression, or freedom of belief and religious belief. So if I have a right to say, okay, this is what I believe, I can disbelieve what you believe.
Yes.
Right? So now going back to the provisions of the law, as far as Nigeria stands, and this is for the viewers, the law is very clear. A gathering of people cannot organize or solemnize marriage. A priest, no religious organization can solemnize marriage. Individuals cannot, marry together. And even when that marriage is done abroad, and those individuals come to Nigeria, that marriage will not be recognized.
No, you made mention of the religious man trying to...
Yes, it's actually outlawed by the provisions of that legislation.
Yeah, Pope, sorry to cut you short, Pope Francis talked about same-sex marriage, and he approved it. And he's the head over the Catholic in Nigeria.
Yes.
So, not in Nigeria, in the world now. Yeah. So, in such case, whatever he stands or whatever he says about same-sex marriage do not apply in Nigeria.
Yes. His position would only have persuasive influence. Okay. But his positions cannot be binding on the Nigerian people. It may not necessarily be even binding on the African Catholic Church, because the African Catholic Church is largely guided by culture, by tradition, by morals, and morals differs from society to society. Okay. So as far as Nigerians are concerned, whatever any religious leader from the West is saying may only be persuasive. It will just open the ground for debate. So when he made such statements, when you go on social media, you see persons who support the view, some other persons who go against the view. But largely, as far as you are a citizen in Nigeria or you reside in Nigeria, you must, as a matter of responsibility, obey the provisions of the law. If you feel not comfortable, maybe you relocate, because the provision still stands. And if you want that to change, you have to pass through the democratic structures of reviewing that particular legislation, of repealing that particular legislation, or amending the particular legislation. So for people who need to know this, it's very important to know that for abating same-sex marriage, for encouraging it, for solemnizing it, for registering an organization to push that idea, you'll be liable for 10 years. For those who have the same-sex marriage, they'll be liable for 14 years imprisonment. I don't think anybody wants to find themselves in that situation. But if you ask me to look at a review of that particular legislation, the question we'll now begin to ask ourselves is who actually catches or arrests those persons?
Yes.
What is the body necessarily on ground to carry out that particular action? So that really begs the question. And for the fact that some concepts, that legislation didn't really define concepts like gay rights and so on and so forth. So these are issues that we need to look at. And if you say you are going to be sending somebody to 14 years imprisonment, 10 years imprisonment, where are they going to be imprisoned? In a room where same-sex persons will be sleeping.
Wow.
All right. Okay. So that tells us that we need to look at a way of probably orientation. Okay. We need to look at the psychological aspect of it, how we can correct society, and it starts from the family unit. We have to go back to the family unit to ensure that the institution of marriage and family is intact. Okay, so
while we wrap up on that, just the part where you said for the fact that you contribute to it and that you called it abating, that you're liable to 10 years imprisonment. So if I see my neighbor cohabiting with another man, if a male neighbor cohabiting with another male, I have the right to go to the police and report these people.
Of course, you have the right to do that. And when you are doing that, you have to ensure that you have very strong evidence. So that is just the position. Once the evidence is available, then you can secure a conviction in court, which is the High Court of any state or the High Court of the FCT. That's the court with the jurisdiction to prosecute that matter.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the program today. It's been a great and amazing time. The number is displayed on the screen. If you have questions concerning this particular subject topic, do well to reach us. And don't forget, we are on all streaming platforms. OGTV is on Facebook, it's on Instagram, and you can stream our live programs on YouTube. My name is Miriam Usman. You on the Law continues next week. See you next week. Bye for now.